Ladies and gentlemen, FCAT just gave us the high five sign, which means it's time for the regularly scheduled selectmen's meeting here in the town of Sunderland. It's Monday night, if we can call it to order here at 7:03. We're going to start talking first and foremost with a solar update. Anybody who's watched has known that over the last couple of weeks there has been a bit of a holding pattern as to the projects, the status of the projects, the status of the entity, etc. This Panasonic talking caller ID white backlit LCD box in front of me has Beth Greenblatt on the other side. She's going to give us a briefing about the last week's events regarding our two LLCs, and that's the two holding companies that are our two projects. That's how they're both built. From there, we're going to have selectmen's updates. We're going to revisit the annual town meeting warrant, continue to include motions or not include motions. We have some members of the Sunderland Elementary School Committee here to continue a conversation about at least one of the warrant articles. And then we have a series of small approval pieces, one-day liquor license, comments around our policy, and then a little update about our front steps project. So enough about that. Beth, what happened last week with respect to our LLCs?
Thank you, Scott. So we've had some interesting progress over the past week. The liquidator has been in negotiation with actually the entity that the Sunderland Selection Committee had chosen as its runner-up to Broadway for the development of these projects. And I would say they are at the 5-yard line, getting very close to scoring the goal. They are in the process of negotiating. I would.
Oh, at their own 5-yard line.
What?
At their own 5-yard line.
At their own 5-yard line. Thank you, Margaret. They're negotiating some of the last-minute details with respect to transaction costs and that kind of stuff. Broadway. The projects that Broadway developed, as you know, were very, very familiar to the Kearsarge IESI team, who is very, very anxious to build the Sunderland projects. They believe they would like us, of course, to apply for the extension for continuation of SREC 1 certification for as long a term as we can get, but they feel very confident they'll be able to, if they get this contracting piece done in short order, that they will be able to have the projects built out. We will need some support from the town if the town's going to proceed with respect to working with Western Mass Electric and the planning board to have those, the permits and the interconnection agreements transferred over. The team of Kearsarge and IESI, as I mentioned, were your sort of second most favored group. They've actually built, since you've seen them, or the town has seen them, they've actually built 8 projects together, comprehensive ground-mounted projects. Some as close as, read off a couple of communities that they've built them in: Grafton, Concord, Barry. They're working in Chester. They're working in Chicopee, and a couple of projects in Franklin, Mass. So they have a pretty extensive portfolio of projects that they've built. They've also built projects for National Grid, for one of the utilities. So I think from a technical and capabilities perspective, the team that is now before us is one that has extensive experience, and more so than I think the last team that we discussed.
Okay, so Beth, the 5-yard line. If it was basketball, it's about 3 hours of TV for 5 minutes. If it's solar, what kind of timeline is that?
I had hoped, and I have my cell phone in my hand right now, I had hoped that I would get a text from the liquidator saying the deal is done. They are literally negotiating now over, for lack of a better term, what his fee is going to be, that he's going to take out of this, is my understanding, and legal costs. So the deal itself, I think, has been fully negotiated. It's now these transaction costs that they are going back and forth on with one another.
Okay, one other follow-up, Beth, if I could. Just
Sure.
one more time. We have if you just explain the two LLCs, the relationship between the LLCs and the actual project. People aren't
Sure.
actually, these companies aren't buying anything more than essentially a company.
That's correct. What was formed for these individual projects are project LLCs, which is very typical for utility-type assets. And this entity will actually buy the project LLC, which is nothing more than a legally formed administrative entity that was engaged to execute all of the obligations and requirements of the contract with the town, including the pilot obligations, the lease obligations, and all of the obligations as set forth by the planning board.
Tom, you have questions?
No, actually, Beth, I like this better than the first proposal that came in. I mean, it seemed like the first proposal was kind of went around the whole process. So these people were, the Fishback and Moore were part of the process. They understood the process. They were highly, they scored very highly. I don't have a problem with this at all.
That's great. I personally feel more comfortable because of their extensive track record in Massachusetts and their familiarity with the town sites.
Well, that's
They
the second.
did
That's
do
the second
prior
point.
engineering.
That's the second point, and probably more as just as important. They went through the process, and there were certain things that we had put in there. You know, the education component was a big thing for us, and again, they were in for the long haul. For all we knew, this other company that was negotiating to take over broadband, they just wanted to get a bill, collect a paycheck, and go home. So, I think I like this much better.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm hoping to be able to report to Margaret tomorrow some very good news that the deal has been agreed to, and we will likely need support from town council to ensure that whatever this acquisition that's being made does not go around any of the town's requirements, just to ensure everything is done appropriately and properly.
Can I suggest that we don't run a play action pass or anything? Just hand it off to the fullback and let him go in?
Oh, you lost me on that one. In English 15.
So you said they're on
Sorry,
the
I
5-yard
never
line.
started with sports analogies.
No play action pass. Just hand the ball off and go in for the score, okay?
Okay.
Of course, the irony of the football analogy is that we're getting into drafting week, I guess, so we're starting to build the team, right?
It's getting close.
Thanks, Beth. We appreciate the update, and stay warm tonight.
I will. And Margaret, I'll give you a buzz tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Thanks much, folks. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yep, that's it. That's it.
Thank you, FCAT. I appreciate that techie support. So I want to pass over the minutes as David's not here, and he was here for the meeting when this went on, including the motions to include a series of articles. I think that would be more prudent. David's hung up on the Mass Pike right now, and if he does make it in, maybe we'll meet at the door exiting. But anyway, wish him the best on the Pike. It's not always fun out there. So we could start right off the bat with our warrant articles, Tom. And the very first warrant article may well be one of the reasons that two members of the school committee, Amy Zioli and Doug Fulton, I always get it wrong. I'm terrible with names. My customers go, "You've been working with me for 6 years and you still don't," I'm sorry, but I know. Good, okay. So our very first article here, motion to include, happens to do with teacher retirement. Tom, if you look at the format, we've got articles in front of us up to a line on page.
I'm sorry I didn't number the pages, but
No. Page
there's a-
3. At the base of page 3 on the back side is where we need to stop for tonight, right?
the board has already taken action on all the articles below that border.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, in front of us, we have, one of the articles has to do with the sum of value for a one-time teacher retirement. And there's been discussion over, I don't know, since early January about how to go about this teacher retirement. There was our discussion at our meeting, there was some discussion at your meeting. We know we're in the $83,000 range. And the question becomes not so much about the obligation, about the need for the obligation to to be paid. That's not a problem. That is not a discussion point. However, it's a contractual obligation. The discussion point has got to be around, and I think has got to be around a systematic way of approaching it from, and I'm gonna paraphrase and I'm gonna back away. From the school's perspective, right? The school's perspective is we have a pretty significant bump at one time. And it can reflect poorly on an expense request going in, knowing that it's just for retirement. The question in that process becomes, well, what happens next year? Does that money end up going away? Is there some linearity to it? What happens? The flip side to that is, it historically has been funded through operating budget, and it's come not in onesies or twosies, or certainly threesies, as is this case, one of which is effectively a year in arrears. And having it come forward as a form of a warrant article, the question becomes, is that obligation actually being met in the operating budget? And I say that in the operating budget because right now, the school, like the town departments, like anybody who has a business, will effectively at some point have 100% turnover, including those obligations, post-employment obligations. So we have this situation this year where we've got 3 we're trying to work through the obligation for post-employment. And in this, what's the best mechanism for going about funding it? David, and I will paraphrase, and that he wasn't here, rightly so, last week, brought up, well, there is a value, a 1 point something value to even this all out over a couple of years. And maybe that's the appropriation mechanism. I don't know about how those carry forwards can happen from an accounting point of view. That's more Patty and Brian and company.
Sure.
But what we have right now is the potential for an impasse between, is it funded through a town meeting warrant article? On the surface, it can be, well, we have this expense collectively, whether it's the Board of Selectmen, or in this case here, the elementary school, and we've had it for some time. We know it's been coming because we have employees, and we're just gonna fund it through a warrant article. Is that the best possible way to go about it? And I hope that captures the current state. I know the board has had discussion about why wouldn't we have this in the expense budget, and I understand what 6% can look like.
Right.
Only to fund a retirement. I get it. I understand the mechanism. I think I understand the reasoning behind it. I want to make sure that in this discussion, we can maybe get to that reasoning and an appropriate mechanism.
What that does, how it ultimately happens, I think there's the total dollars with that and everything else, that we're asking for. And then there's how it gets done.
Right.
I think you laid out different issues. I guess for us, that piece of, we go through this detailed discussion, certainly, in the school committee, and then with you guys in the finance committee, and we see all the details that make up this big number, and then whatever, percentage change that is. I think the average person that walks into town meeting, sees a sheet in front of them, they see a total number, and they see a percentage increase. And so, does it help that process if it's a separate warrant for them?
I think that was our big discussion item, was it didn't seem like a fair representation of what our budget typically looks like on a year-to-year basis, because then next year, it shoots back down again.
Right.
So, as Doug was saying, to your average person, when you're looking at that, without having to see all the details of the retirement and watching the selectmen's meeting, to look at that, it didn't seem like a very fair snapshot of what the elementary school budget typically looks like, when really, as we went up 2.98, that's a pretty flat budget, considering we've actually gone up in our enrollment quite a bit. So we wanted that to really look like it was a good picture of what the elementary school budget really looks like, and to have that big chunk in there seemed like it was made more of a sense to take that out so people could really see. This year we had 3 retirements, at this, and luckily we've had those teachers have been with us 25 plus years, and so it is, even that for those particular teachers is a bit of an anomaly, because that is such a huge expense. One of the things we had asked for, and we didn't have them for tonight, was just information is, how often does this happen? And I think you said that, Tom. To actually have 3, we've had 1, we've had 2, but to have 3 teachers sort of at the top of everything retire all at once, I don't know, I can tell you within the last 5 years we haven't had that happen, because we had that information. Patty didn't get a chance to go back, so we don't have that, but, we'd be curious to see. I don't know how often that happens. It does feel like we have, our building is filling up with younger, employees.
Right.
But as you said, Tom, Scott, we employ people, so this is gonna happen. To be able to plan for it, even Doug and I were saying, I'm not sure the best way to do that, because I don't, you don't foresee. We even just got one for this year.
Right.
I think they're supposed to have information in by October, but that doesn't always happen, and you don't know if it's coming. So it's another one of those fluid items that, we're certainly open to suggestions on how to plan for that, so we can all have a better picture of what that looks like.
Tom, you want to weigh in?
Well, I think what we were talking about last week was the right mechanism to move forward.
Agreed.
And the conversation has to take place. And I think, as when we've talked in the past, the recent past, was more about how you almost have to look at it as a capital expense, and the fact that you're gonna replace that fire truck at some time, and you can kind of figure out how it's gonna be. So I would say that our staff, we don't have that buyout at the end of the career that the schools have, so we don't account for it, because that's kind of foreign to us. I think Margaret went back and she found in 2010 that there was a $44,000
FY12, $44,000 in the school budget.
FY12, there was 44,000 that was taken from the school budget that we didn't know about it because it was in the school budget. So now you have the 83,000, and again, I don't think the conversation is if we pay or not to pay, but it's how we plan for it in the future. I think that's the most important. Now, I also think that we have to maybe be proactive, like some other communities, and this payment may not, there may be alternatives to this payment, not that we can address now, but down in the future, that we have to look at, because this is, like you said, it's a very sizable thing. So we have to look at what we can do to moderate that expense. I think David was saying it was average out like 1.8 a year.
Right.
So hopefully Patty can put together, look out 5 and 10 years and see
Forecast.
what it's actually going to be, and maybe we have to start planning for that.
Yeah, is that, I've heard some discussion, is that something, can the school committee have a fund that's, we can't have our own kind of stabilization fund for retirement stabilization or something, can we, or can we?
The town can adopt special stabilization funds for different purposes.
Yeah.
So the town
So
can actually establish a special stabilization fund. There may be other mechanisms. The town established an OPEB trust fund, and the town has to look into, we're gonna have to look into qualifying expenses out of the OPEB trust fund. We haven't started funding it yet, but we'd have to start looking as to, whether or not contract retirement payouts can be included in such a trust fund. So these are all things that we'd have to look into.
And that's all through the town, that's what would all through
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually the town's obligation through an actuarial, looking at the retirement and healthcare benefit of its total employees, and that includes
Includes the school?
school.
Yeah.
Sure.
The question is, do some of the terms in the contract that allow for accumulation of time and then a buyout qualify? or fit in the mold,
Yeah.
whatever.
Sure.
Whatever the legislation may say, no, that's a
Parameters.
contract, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're recognizing that, I think collectively, we recognize, certainly at the town level, having created that OPEB piece, that it has to be, I'm gonna lose my voice, it has to be funded programmatically, because,
You
again,
shave the beard, you lose your voice?
you know,
How'd that happen?
they're not,
You must
it's not
got too
mutually,
much
His
coal
throat's
in the
cold.
it's not mutually
The vocal
exclusive.
cords.
It was hollering at a blue
If
show.
only Janet knew that earlier.
That's a good point, actually. So the key in front of us becomes, is the best possible way of funding this particular obligation. And could you briefly talk to the schedule for, I know the school committee's voted its budget.
We've voted its budget, and we will meet again April 15th,
Okay,
so,
April 15th.
yeah.
Okay, and I say that because between now and then, there may well be some kind of solution that comes out of it that will need all of our input.
Right.
April 15th. And Tom, your point last week was about the need for the discussion, because having it simply show up as an annual town meeting warrant as an article isn't necessarily the best possible mechanism for any kind of retirement component or post-employment obligation. We've done it onesie twosies in the past, particular, but this one here is a pretty big nut. And I also think, I want to paraphrase again before I finally stop talking. You also were very clear last week, and rightly so, that it's also the cost of employment, so it should be budgeted.
Correct.
You know,
Well,
we know there's a cost of employment at 10 years, at 15 years, and maybe there's a trigger. Patty can work out that formula. There's the professional status, and then years in service equals X based on the current contract. Somehow that has to reside in a budgeted format to avoid this kind of a warrant article arrangement.
Again, I think, and it seems like a situation that lends itself to a separate fund, though, because it's not, we're not spending it
Right.
as we go. We're
Right.
Right.
saving it
Right.
to be, for the big one-off expense that comes at some point, or expenses.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
But I do think, as Tom was saying, if we look at it as more of a capital expense, I just don't know how accurately we plan for that. But it feels separate. It definitely feels separate from what it costs us every year to run the school.
it is separate, but one of the things that we do is that we're predicting cost 18 and 24 months out.
Yeah.
So, in sometimes that drives, if we had that $83,000 slotted for a use, all of a sudden that use that we may have been looking for 5 years becomes null and void because
That's a good point.
somebody says, well, we need it this year.
Yeah.
Now, we've been putting things off for a number of years, and all of a sudden, somebody says, we don't have a choice, we have to pay this year.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Now, for us, it's like, in the finance committee, and the other people in town that have been trying to plan, it's a kick in the pants, because all of a sudden, this bill's coming due, and we recognize we don't have a lot of options with that, but it puts us, our plans have now got shifted another.
This really, this actually, this, an amount this size has an effect on the town's cash reserves, on the percent remaining of cash reserves after appropriations at town meeting. So, this, an amount this size, regardless of what it's for, does threaten the town's level of cash reserves. Not only that, if you were to look at free cash and the town's free cash guidelines and the third guidelines we operate by, this would be drawing from that free cash that's supposed to be generated from the next year and wipe that out.
Right.
So, that's a dangerous scenario for the following year's free cash, yeah.
So for us, it's difficult because we're trying to stabilize the ups and downs. And like, now the FY12, there was $44,000 in the school budget to pay for that retirement. Now,
Well, yeah, well, I mean, we could, I don't remember the details of that 2012 budget and what enabled us to be able to, and what, in the end, our percent increase was, and
Right.
all the factors that went into it in that year, and then this is something that's almost double that. Believe me, it's a, you know, it's a big number for us to look at, and
Right.
for everybody to look at, so it's, and I think, and one that, well, I certainly haven't seen since I've been on the school committee. You've been on longer.
7
Yeah,
years, yeah.
so I think we've been through this surprise. It would be good to look for solutions in the future that would help us manage this and work with you to do that. But it certainly wasn't anything we were looking to come and surprise folks with, because I think it was, you know.
and I just think
And so then,
we need to have, we
Yeah.
need to have better communication about stuff like that. And it doesn't start with you guys. I mean, that's, and like you said, Doug, that was a shock to you, but you should have known. Somebody should have told you.
Well, I think when we found out is when you all found out,
Right.
as far as that, you know, so I understand what you're saying, but when the opportunity for communication was there, we took it.
Yeah.
So as early, you know, as early as we could have,
Yeah.
Tom, but you could go way back.
Right, and I guess that's,
And
We're on the
perhaps
same page
that's
with that.
best in a
Yeah.
different venue, as
absolutely.
far, you know, I understand what you're saying.
And the real difficult conversation in and around this is to ensure that the elementary school or Frontier or Franklin Tech or the board's budget going to town meeting isn't in any way a catalyst for someone to question its credibility. You know, I always talk about a credibility gap, and you know, it's almost intangible. But you know, the question about in building a retirement piece into the budget, you know, what happens to it? Does it go up? Does it go down? What goes on with it? Those credibility, I think the current superintendent has raised that point at a capital meeting more than once. You know, these credibilities are something that are important to her to maintain, and that's of equal importance to us as well. Whenever we go to town meeting, it's absolutely just perfectly clear, like pitch perfect. So, anyway,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't want to talk about that. They're like, "Oh, it's just the budget." No, actually, there's an underlying component to it. You know, and that's also an area of concern. We're going to make sure that everybody's credibility is maintained. Okay, so that's path forward. You have an opportunity on the 15th. We have work ahead of us that is a combination of funding mechanisms and method. That's going to be really, really important as we go forward. We're developing the town meeting warrant and the budget simultaneously. You're an important component to that. That said, over the next, I would say, week, in short order, we have to come up with some measure of solutions so it can make it to your agenda as well, go through the superintendent and the business manager, as well as, you know, something that we can go forward together with towards some measure of conclusion. But also, not just this year. Something that's
Right.
got to be the formula for next year, 3 years, you know.
Well, and I think if it's, you just said it, Scott, I think a formula would really be something that would be helpful to everybody.
Right.
This is what we follow. This is the timeline. This is what it looks like.
Right.
And like you were saying, Tom, maybe it needs to go way back. Maybe we need to start talking to this, in negotiations and,
Great point.
Well, and
Some of those mechanisms
Margaret
came out of
and
that.
I had
Yeah.
a conversation, something that we're gonna research and probably put forward, both at Frontier and at the elementary school, part of the negotiation for next time. Because there are ways around this, or you can moderate this expense. And I guess for us at least, is this is a high watermark where you can say, and again, it's not the teacher's fault, it's not anyone's fault, it's just that this is a tough nut for us to crack, and is it really responsible seeing charges like that? But there's ways we can maybe fix it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Anything else? You got the mic for just another couple minutes.
Well, I mean, the only thing, you know, not to rehash the school budget, but what based, you know, piggybacking on what Amy had said later, I mean, without this, you know, the percent increase, I think, was 2.96, 9.76, something like that. And
9.96, you're right, 2.96.
and I was looking at our enrollment numbers in the recent history, and from a year and a half ago to this, you know, 6 months ago in October, that year over year was up 12%. And which is part, you know, and some other things which leave us with a tight budget
Sure.
that we're dealing with this year, just
Oh, yeah.
making it through on the budget and what we're looking for. And there is this variability from year to year with, you know, the school where it can swing like that.
The school has already absorbed an unexpected payout this year. Last
Yeah.
fall, there was another large payout. So these, I mean, some sort of programmatic funding is going to be needed. So.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating piece about school population 3 weeks ago at the Selectmen's Association meeting
Yeah.
about how a declining enrollment population actually drives expenses up.
Yeah.
And there is a sweet spot somewhere where your ideal efficiencies kind of come in.
But in
So
this,
it's just-
I was gonna say, why don't we just solve it like the state does?
Yeah.
Doug, we'll give you $25 for every new student.
Exactly. Really simple.
Doug,
Don't spend it all in one place.
every new student, $25.
thing of beauty, right?
How's that? That's fair, isn't it?
But it's this irony in this overall picture of declining enrollment. I mean, Sunderland has actually been increasing enrollment. Now, and it's projected to level back out and maybe slowly
Right.
increase. But overall, I mean, everybody assumes that everywhere it's going down, and it isn't actually in
Actually,
Sunderland.
that point was raised at that meeting as well.
And I mean,
It was
just-
fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
We've worked really hard at that,
Right.
actually.
It's
I
something
mean,
exactly
that's
you
what,
wanted it to go this way.
When you think back 5-6 years,
Right,
you know, we've really worked very hard to get those kids
and the population
back
will
in
go
the
up
school.
more because one of the local communities just made severe cuts to their budget, and there'll be more needs. I'm sure more kids will be choicing out, so that will get, and
So when we get a good look.
wow, for a whole $5,000
But there's a lot of good things to look at, too,
Yeah.
Right,
you know.
I think we do business all wrong, but
That's great
we
stuff.
said that for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think we have said it's a game that nobody wants to play, but we're all forced to play it. I mean, there's really not much,
hey, you pit one town against the next.
right? Right.
And you you really look at any means of judging success, and there's no difference between.
That's a
Whatever.
great point.
So keep us posted, obviously, and if
yeah.
it helps to have us back here for any other meetings, happy to do it.
I appreciate that, I really do, as well as making the time to come in tonight. These kinds of discussions are the most fruitful.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Great.
Have a
Thanks,
great
guys.
night.
Thanks.
Thank
Hey,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
So
Amy.
with res-
Thanks, Deb.
with-
Thank
With
you,
respect to our process tonight, Tom, David missing, I'm wondering about continuing with motions to include or not to include, only in that it's the annual town meeting warrant and is his voice. What's your
Well-
thoughts on it? Well, again, we're only talking about inclusion, not recommending, nothing at all, not form, not numbering.
I think we should keep going, Scott. I mean, most of these I think are pretty straightforward. I mean,
Yeah, we have to pay
You-
veterans
we
benefits,
don't
et
have
cetera.
we don't have an option on the veterans benefits. I mean.
Yep.
Just keep going.
I wanted to just put that out. Okay, so the very first one, we had part of this discussion tonight. There is a dollar value here that's blank, right? All the dollar values are blank. Thanks again. And so our discussion tonight is about the remaining articles on the annual town meeting, warrant, moving to include. The discussion we just had was about an obligation for a retirement package, a retirement payout at the elementary school, one from last year, two from the current year. Tom, what's your feeling about including, and then we have other mechanisms available to us through recommendation or
Scott,
passing over?
as we said before, I don't, typically this board has always voted to include articles I've presented out of respect from other committees and boards.
Correct.
I don't know why we would change now. This isn't a recommendation.
No, it's just inclusion.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so is there a motion?
Motion.
I'll second that motion. That's to include an article that covers the transfer of available funds for the payout for retirement, teacher retirements at the elementary school. All those in favor?
Aye.
2-0, please. Right below that is a sum of values, and Margaret, this is important in my mind. Is this article for the current year?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so this is a current year invoice, and the way it works in the state of Massachusetts is the town, a veteran who declares a request for a benefit, contacts the veteran's agent, notifies the agent of the town he's living in, the town appropriates the money, and then at some point in the future, between a year and 18 months, the state reimburses a percentage of that appropriation.
75%?
75% is reimbursed about 18 months later, close to 2 years. This is neither here nor there as far as the article goes, because this is a current year shortfall, but there is a legislative bill pending. Again, Steve Kulik has submitted a bill, and there are other co-sponsors to try to get the state to take this over and relieve the town of the burden of funding this up front. So, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Well, is this not an unfunded mandate?
Maybe 25% of
It
it.
doesn't matter, $1.
Right. Right, because you're having to fund up front.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They're telling you gotta fund 25%. You're not saying if it's good or bad. I mean, but it is an unfunded mandate. They just pass it along to the
That's
towns.
right, they do.
This goes very much, Tom, to the point you were making earlier in the school, in that, the town develops budgets that are this year and impacts on revenues next year. This has a similar impact. If 3 veterans or a veterans service request comes in of a value similar to the article we just voted to include, it has the very same impact.
It does.
So the whether it's an unfunded mandate of $1 or the mechanism is the part that's really the piece that's in question. That's clearly the state's impact on our town resources.
That's exactly it. I mean, these spikes, these additional funding requirements can happen at any time during a fiscal year, immediately, and they happen immediately, right?
And that's all we're saying, is that you just gotta give us a system that's manageable,
That's right. Yep.
right?
It's a great.
That's what's
And the
being
other thing is,
asked.
and what we also see is that you can have people that apply for this that can bounce around from town, that move between town to town.
Yes.
Also.
Yeah.
So they're still in Massachusetts.
Oh, they can move in from out of state very quickly,
Right,
yeah?
but I'm saying, it's very typical, they could stay within Massachusetts, so it's more or less on the state versus a local.
That's right, exactly.
But it's very hard sometimes for small towns to respond to this, and I bet you if you looked at what our budget for this was 10 years ago and compare it to now, it's probably the fastest growing budget item that we have.
It's very, yeah, next year, you've already seen the spike in what we're estimating for next year, so yeah, it's a lot. There are very, very small towns north of here, next to the Vermont border, that are paying, one of them is having to come up with $80,000. $80,000 in a budget of probably $3 million. So,
Again,
it's
Tom,
amazing.
Your point's well taken. We're talking about the sign of the times, but in 2009, $2,500 last year, $42,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going.
And again, I understand it's a sign of the times, but
Well, sort of, but a lot of the people that are having these benefits are not recent members of the armed forces.
no.
Not
You're absolutely
necessarily.
right about that.
Although there is an influx, but yeah, not necessarily.
Anyway. It's not about the veterans, it's not about their need, it's about our state and their policies and how they implement it.
It's a great clarification.
I hope other people, I hope if somebody's watching, they understand that.
Right.
It's just how it's implemented, that's
It's the funding mechanism.
It's very difficult.
Right.
And I would say the same thing, and we do say the same thing about special education. How do you, and if someone can explain how we fund special education, we put in, why do,
That's another.
or, I'll go one step further. If we have a police cruiser that's in an accident, it's covered by insurance. Well, we have, even though the insurance money is being covered by, or the car is being covered by insurance money, we have to come appropriate that money
Right.
to buy. How does that make sense?
Right.
To anybody but
This-
a bureaucrat someplace?
Good point. Hey, David.
And I think that concludes our meeting for tonight.
My apologies.
No trouble, David.
Were you doing the intro scene?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's downstairs shooting the
They're shooting
video.
his intro.
Shoot the
Shot
video.
Tires out, you know.
Da-da-da, running into the
Oh,
building.
boy.
So, Dave, what we're on right now is the,
Budget.
yeah, no.
Here.
We're working right through the motions, continuing the motions to include. We're gonna do the,
Motion.
here, read that
Number
one
two.
too.
You're on veterans benefits.
We haven't acted on those.
Motion.
So the second article, we're just having a discussion about the veterans' benefits. This is this year's payment, so there's a motion on the table to include this article. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0, please. So the next article is about availability, and we've done this the last 4 years with available funds and using the free cash guidelines of a value to be determined to move into capital stabilization.
Yeah.
And when capital stabilization was developed, we committed to doing this. So,
Motion.
Second.
if a motion made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please. And so this comes out of stabilization, in theory,
The next is the capital budget.
yes. And again, this is only a motion to include, we're gonna talk about the budget at length at next week's meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please. Special legislation for Jim Ballounis to stay on as a firefighter. We did this recently for Richard Dickinson as well.
Yes.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0. Technology audit is a DLS audit? Or no, action as
This
a
is
part
action
of-
following a
right.
DLS audit. The town has been, this is not gonna be showing in the warrant article, but in the motion, the town has been awarded a $5,000 grant toward that, so we still have to come up with the dollar value on that.
Sorry. Margaret, is that actually a town meeting
Excuse me.
appropriation if it's a grant?
Grant is offsetting the total cost of the technology
Got
audit,
it.
so we'll be looking
Okay.
for the excess.
The difference, I see. So there'd be a value here to fund a grant of a larger value.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, an audit of a larger value.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0. This is, next is to help with some design costs for the Sunderland Volume 3 that we appropriated for the Volume 3, and there's some costs associated with some of the design work on this?
That's correct. And this is I think the person is named in that article.
Yep.
The person to whom the payment will be due.
Okay.
There is going to be, what I'd be recommending, I think, is a mix of funding from the receipts already from the Volume 3 sales.
Okay.
And then an additional amount from free cash, and then future receipts to go back to the general fund. So
Okay.
to reimburse the general fund, yeah.
Motion.
Second.
There's a motion made and seconded to include. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0, please.
Copies are still available on Amazon. as I
Yes.
recall.
Thank-
So,
I'm gonna have to get
it's a
one.
fantastic read.
You can get 1 and 2 also.
Yeah. They're probably handy to have.
The
You lose the plot thread if you don't have.
It's like starting in the 3rd Potter book, you know?
It's
It's
just
so
not the
hard to
same.
get.
Yep.
It's not the same. Oh, that's funny. Code of Sunderland Personnel Bylaws.
Oh,
It's
The
the
pers-
strike-through one.
yeah, well, there are 2 that are proposed. One is on introductory period, employee introductory period. The other is on violations of personnel bylaws. It's just imposing penalties for violations of personnel bylaws.
Okay.
Those are the only 2 draft changes the Personnel Committee has at this point. They didn't have a chance to meet tonight, so next Monday night.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please. And we have a new revised dog control article. Bylaw.
I'm thinking, this takes up, what, 3 pages, I
Yeah.
think. I'm thinking
bit
that
stiff.
we may redo this to identify it as, as a handout for town meeting, and
Uh-huh.
identify it in here as such, so it can come right off the warrant, and,
Yeah.
but
So it would be,
these,
it would have, the article would read to,
it,
as per the handout,
Exactly.
bylaw,
right.
I think David will enjoy reading this one.
These are all changes that are now in line with the statute change
Oh, right.
last year, or the year before.
Got it.
No, it's called animal
Yeah.
control. Second.
Yeah, motion's made and seconded, and again, I think a handout's a better way to approach this. At least we have it to include. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please. Okay. Now the
You may
la-
now be getting into articles that may not have to be included.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to me the first one's gotta be involved. That's an intermunicipal agreement with, on a EMS building.
Yes. That might,
Let me ask another question. Since it's not specific to a building, Tom, you're our contact on this. Would it make sense to keep this, at least allowing the board to enter into an intermunicipal agreement?
Well, it
And then,
says,
but remove library building?
Yeah.
just leave it as a general.
I'd rather leave the language like it is, Scott.
Okay,
And that we'd be talking about a very specific building.
okay.
Okay.
And if we are to buy something, we should probably,
Bring it back.
I would think
Yeah.
we'd wanna come back to the town
Separate,
anyways.
yeah.
Okay. So, there's already reason to include this, is the next question.
I mean, I don't know that it buys us anything keeping it there, does it? I don't know.
Well, I
That's
guess-
a
I guess-
really, that's a very interesting
I
question.
would hope, we'll have another meeting a little bit, we can talk to one another, but, there are potentials. They haven't generated a purchase and sale agreement
That's right.
yet.
Well, that's true. That's true. And we can always strike it on the floor.
That's true.
Withdraw it
Pass
at that
it
time.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think maybe put it there and,
Let's keep it on, so what I'm hearing is keeping it on the warrant, moving to include it,
yeah,
and then we have options
always
on the
withdraw
floor.
it.
And that gets us right to the last
Right.
Friday of April,
Yeah.
so.
that's fine.
Okay, so a motion to include?
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0, please. Okay. This is unpaid bills.
Unpaid bills of prior fiscal years, there may be none.
Oh, that's all right.
There may be none.
Well, as a mechanism, we used to call a special town meeting, and last year we did not. We included these.
That's right, it's usually
the
a
annual.
smallish number, but
Motion,
Stragglers.
Okay.
Second.
just
That's
in
like the
case.
just to have, just in case.
Absolutely. Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0. Is Silver Lane town meeting, or is that really a function of the board?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Renaming of the street. Is it a requirement? It's already accepted.
Yeah.
That's a town meeting
Yeah.
function.
Hear it back?
I'm waiting to hear back from legal counsel on that. I believe it's going to be under the board's jurisdiction, so if you wanna just hold on that for now, I am waiting to hear back from legal counsel.
We'll hold off until next week then. The next one down, this is a requirement anytime that town meeting accepts a way. This one
This
here
is
is
a-
about essentially the school
School
driveway,
Mm-hmm.
Swampfield Drive.
I think that the bounds would have to be identified in the article, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and so we don't have a survey done yet, we don't have bounds identified, so we don't know the exact length that the town would want to take for the public way. So I'll leave that in the board's hands. You know, I would assume, because I haven't looked at the plan, so I don't know whether or not the driveway itself was surveyed as a road width. Okay, so,
Might be in there.
if it was surveyed, if the bounds are in there, then the town could potentially proceed. I know that in the highway superintendent's request for repaving the section of road, he does identify a length.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't know if the board would want to, you know, use those dimensions, or,
I think I know where it's defined.
okay, in the plan?
Plans.
In the plan?
Well, yeah, it's in the plans, and they're in the fault.
Just pull them off the plans
And
put
the
that-
logic behind doing this is the application of chapter 90 money to
That's correct.
resurface and
Yep.
drainage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So it
Discuss-
should be there. So you wanna hold off on this until we,
Yeah, until we can get the,
We would need to know we would need to know the facts to bring it forward to town meeting. And the facts include width, layout,
Right.
length, et cetera. So let's pass over this until next week.
okay,
Excuse me. And next is going to be, deficit, this is real time this year, full-time fireman's
that's
wages.
just taking care of what we're doing now.
That's an appropriation transfer, and in fact,
Yeah, we have the money,
Right.
it's just,
yes, and we could use the end-of-year appropriation transfer process instead of town meeting. I just had it there.
so we don't need to do that.
We don't need to do it on a warrant. It-
Fine.
Okay. So what we have moving forward is two that are still on placeholder. One is Silver Lane and one is Swampfield Drive.
okay. We did the rest last week, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're running right to that line.
To the-
Board of, since David's here, we can go over the minutes for the 17th.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept the minutes of March 17th. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please.
Just a note on those minutes, the
Late.
name of the contractor on the solar project was just changed to IESI, but there's a note here that it was associated with the Fishbach and Moore proposal.
Very in-depth note from last week, weren't they?
Yes.
Detailed.
Very, it was great.
And everything was laid out in
It
sections.
was. Yeah, it was great.
I was told to stop. I was told to slow down more than once. Slow down.
No, I said you could write them if you want. You didn't
That was
have
the
to
second
say-
time.
Yeah.
Okay, board updates. Tom, you want to talk about regional EMS? Anything over the course of the week? We have a director.
We
Or
had a
offer.
meeting last Thursday. Our first, as I reported last week, our first, William Travis decided to withdraw. We had another meeting last Thursday, and at that, the Board of Oversight voted to recommend to the Deerfield Board of Selectmen that Zachary Smith be named the director. So we discussed hourly rate and start dates and all that. But it's gonna be they meet this Wednesday, Deerfield Board of Selectmen, and our recommendation to appoint Zach. So we had a good conversation about that. So we're gonna be moving forward.
Good. David, anything for the week?
I don't think so.
We had a police negotiation meeting there last Thursday. Continuing to move forward with that progress. We're getting down to the numbers portion of the conversation. And we have a Frontier Union 38 capital definition working group meeting here this coming Thursday. This might well be our last meeting before we come forward with a path or a series of recommendations to bring to each of the towns definitions and methodology for funding future capital. Okay, Margaret, updates?
Yes. Okay, so a Green Communities update. I'm gonna be submitting a report finally to get the $35,000 plus disbursement for the projects that we have completed. Those are the lighting retrofits, the energy audit, some other work. Honestly, I cannot remember. So we're gonna do that, and that way, it's going to allow the town to move on to use the remaining the remaining about $70,000 that we have in this round of Green Communities funding. That has to be used by December 30th of this year. So I'm actually meeting with a member of the Energy Committee tomorrow to go over some of the audit results and see what appropriate next steps might be. DLTA, the town has been awarded DLTA funding for master plan chapter update assistance. And I wanted to present this to the board because they would like the town to give some consideration to the chapter it might like to update in this round of DLTA funding. I was actually thinking that with the Community Pathways request for CPA funding to do some sort of a circulation plan, that maybe the transportation or circulation chapter in the master plan, or village center, or economic development might be appropriate, and the two studies could complement each other. So it's just something to consider for DLTA funding. And then
The definition, action on that, the grant's been awarded, it's a matter of allocating at this point.
It is. It's a matter of letting them know which chapter the town is thinking of. So, I mean, they're going to be ready to provide technical assistance when we are. She was asking whether or not we had any kind of supplemental funding. If the Community Pathways money went through, there'd be funding for a specific project that the Community Pathways group has in mind. But it could tie in to the master plan update, the chapter update. So.
And that Pathways group, that initiative is also going to be relatively new to the master plan. Elements of it, recreation, open space,
Right.
et cetera. Seniors may have been in the prior master plan, but as a new chapter of the master plan, maybe that is a good place to put that particular grant money, it being a new bundle, if you will.
With the circulation chapter,
Yeah.
transportation chapter, getting around downtown type of thing.
I'm just
Mobility.
Mobility.
thinking out loud, that's all.
It just sounds like they might tie in well.
Tom, what do you think?
Well, I also had the reminder that we have this Saturday is our senior appreciation meal, so noontime. So if anybody would like to attend, please give the town clerk a telephone call at 665-1442. Just let her know so we know how much food to prepare. I think she was telling you today we had 30+ people signed up. In the senior center, April 6th through the 12th is volunteer, National Volunteer Recognition Week. Just so people know, at the senior center over in Deerfield, we have a list in their April newsletter. There's 70 volunteers that work. Now, and I'd just like to say, not all the volunteers are less than a certain age either. They run the entire spectrum.
Right.
So,
That makes sense.
and we have many volunteers that would be classified as seniors, but that doesn't stop them from volunteering a lot of their expertise. So I would say, if you're out there and you're looking for something to do, they're always accepting volunteers at the senior center. Also, just so I go down a real quick, and some of the thing is that if you're a senior and you are in need of a 911 cell phone, you can contact the Triad, and Triad, which can reach at 774-4726, at 774-4726, and they can, you can inquire and sign up by calling them. They will come out, the sheriff's department will come out, they'll deliver it and they'll review it for you. Or if you have a cell phone that you'd like to, you have no longer a use for,
Donate.
you can donate it to the sheriff's department, and they go through it, clean it up, and they will put it out there. They get batteries and that kind of stuff. Triad also has a pet food program for eligible seniors. So if you have pets and may have some trouble, there is an eligibility for seniors for cats and dogs. But again, you can call Nancy at 665-2511 or the Triad office, which is 774-4726, and you may be able to get help with your pet food also. The Amherst Survival Center has a free health clinic that's located at 138 Sunderland Road in Amherst, just off Route 116. It's open to everyone on Monday, 12:30 to 1:30, and on Thursday from 5 to 6. Another one that may be of interest is Essential Skills for Family Caregivers. It starts with communication. Melissa Grenier, LCSW of the Alzheimer's Association, will discuss proven communication techniques for caregivers of those with dementia at Franklin County Home Care on Tuesday. Pre-registration required. But if you have concerns, if it's someone that knows someone in your family, you can look that up. And just again, Senior Center has a bunch of stuff going on in April.
Nice. I have one more
I
update.
was gonna ask if you had any more, we subject jumped there a little bit, but that's okay.
No, that's okay. No, it was useful. The only other update I have is on the tip on the North Main Street project.
Oh, yeah.
I got an email today from Maureen Mullaney at the COG, and the TPO is going to be meeting on, that's the Transportation Planning Organization, is going to be meeting on April 10th to discuss projects in the running for 2018 funding. Sunderland North Main Street project is one of those, and she's encouraging, well, I told her that I would attend to advocate for the project, and this is it's just another reminder that the town needs to find a way to fund the engineering for the project in order to really move it forward.
When is that gonna be, Margaret?
April 10th at noon. Thursday, April 10th
Where?
at noon, at the COG. Lunch will be provided. If anybody in town is interested in advocating for that project, feel free to join me. I was gonna ask the highway super to attend as well. Okay, that's it. That's all I have. Promise.
Just getting it in before I forget. Okay. We have in front of us a modification to our one-day liquor policy. Excuse me. And some of the ABCC alignment here. A little bit of italics work.
Keep it online.
And again, looks like we're striking the provisions of the Blue Book under special licenses, and same thing with the first paragraph, and that's about the only change that I see. Well, I'm sorry, there's also a board of one-day liquor fee, has the authority to waive the fee in all inspections as well. That's in there under italics. And then a submission, 10 working days. We've talked about this before because the 10 working days are important. We may not have meetings about this scheduled. We don't want to hold up somebody's one-day request if we don't have a meeting that week.
Yep,
We're not
that
gonna call
makes
a meeting
sense.
just necessarily for that.
Yeah.
So, those are the changes that I can see. Anything else I should?
Yeah, the application is just changed in sorry. Yeah, is that, notes the same change at the top, removing the Blue Book.
Yep.
And also adding the name of responsible manager, because the statute actually requires a license to be issued to the responsible manager.
Is there a motion to adopt the changes as submitted?
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please. We also have in front of us a request for an increase in the Board of Health revolving fund. Board of Health is a really dynamic series of responsibilities. We don't always appreciate, or we should more widely appreciate the kinds of services they provide, from inspections of sanitary trucks to restaurants to schools to, it goes on and on and on. Very interesting. We contract with one agency. We have one agent. And again, some of the interesting things that go on are you know, just catering, restaurants, school kitchens, sludge trucks, food re-inspections, all this happens, apartments, all this happens,
Septic.
both programmatically, but also as a response. Call up, they have to respond to things like outbreaks of communicable diseases, et
There's been
cetera.
an increase in those.
Yeah.
So, they have a revolving fund that's fee-based, and, we have it in our prerogative to have been asked to, and it is in our purview to allow for an increase in that revolving fund.
Motion.
Second. We have a motion made and seconded. Before we take that vote, I would say that I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, the Board of Health needed a significant transfer. They adjusted their fees. They became much more engaged. They've been just really, really, very, very good at what they do. So this is really very, very simple stuff. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0, please. Okay, last up, steps.
So,
Go ahead, Margaret.
okay, so this is, what the board has before it is the original, is the original quote on concrete reconstruction of the front steps.
Yep.
The project was submitted to the CPC as the concrete reconstruction, and based on conversations and CPC's, interest in the historical preservation aspect, they encouraged decorative and architectural elements, to be added to the project. And so Tom had asked for this to be discussed at an upcoming board's meeting as to what course we take.
What do you think, Tom? I know we have a repair to make.
I think David made a valid point, and it was a point that was made at the CPC meeting by some in the audience. It was like $40,000. How'd we get there?
Yeah.
So I just like go back to the original
Look at that.
plan. And I would say it's architecturally consistent with how it was built. They were concrete steps from day one. So I understand it'd be nice to put granite and put a brick wall there, put bricks on but I don't think that's, we don't necessarily, we just need,
It exceeds function.
we need a safe stair with a safe railings.
Right.
And the restoration of the marker. That's it.
Right.
So is that captured inside the scope here?
Looks
Yes,
like
that's
it.
what it is.
Okay.
What was the original quote?
24.
24, 450, 450.
24,000.
That includes that includes the demolition underneath, and then the forms of
Rebuilding
reconstruction,
of them.
rebuilding.
Versus 36, was it?
It was pushing
What was
40.
it, 38, no, the 30, I can't remember what the,
Somewhere
plus
between
design,
36 and 40.
40,000, somewhere.
Okay, so am I hearing that we're looking for a motion to move this forward as a capital, as opposed to what's in front of the
The board will be
Community
addressing
Preservation
capital,
Committee?
so you'll be addressing capital next
Next
week,
week,
and it
right.
is it is included on the
Got it,
capital
okay.
plan, so it can be considered in that.
Got it. So when we develop the capital budget, the question is which number do you plug in?
That's right.
Got it. I understand now. Thank you. Okay, and to follow through with the design component, cement needs to be repaired, plain and simple.
Right.
It does.
That's just like a
That's
pure
the bottom line.
mechanic part of
Right,
it.
right.
Have we got any feedback at all from people as far as?
To the extent that it's solicited through the CPC process, it's an
Yeah.
application, and if people are passionate about something, they go and they participate. Who's passionate about steps, really?
Well,
You
Well, when you're
sometimes you'd be
talking-
surprised at the questions you ask.
I know,
but,
I agree.
Yeah, it's,
function, I think, is
Mhm.
absolutely critical,
Well, right.
regardless of
you
the
have to-
material.
Right.
They need to,
We need to
they
work.
need to be,
We can't have people getting hurt on the steps.
That's right.
Plain and simple. Okay, keep that. So our next Monday meeting is gonna be almost exclusively budget, capital and expenses. So for
That'd
the-
be the week you wanted to get a flat tire.
yeah, exactly.
Not this week, right?
No. So I would encourage people who are interested in the budget, the global budget for the town, the capital expenses. Next week, we're gonna have the big picture as has gone on prior from December to earlier this month. You know, department heads, school committees have all come forward and presented. This is the big overview of the budget. Probably beginning the detailed discussion about where we're gonna fit the available requests into the available revenues, and then prioritization of capital, what we bring forward to town meeting. So again, please, if you're interested in the operating budget of the town, come forward. I'll come forward anytime. but-
You're gonna invite the moderator, Margaret?
Yeah, we have to have the moderator.
Yes. Mhm.
Great point, Tom. Okay, that's it. Any other discussion? If not, is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. This is a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0. If you can call us out at 8:15. Thanks so much, FCAT. And thanks for turning the heat off. I was dying up here. Okay.
Wow.